Welcome to Inflection Points, a podcast about change in tech, hosted by Allie, Irvin, and Brendan Bonner, and brought to you by the Office of the CTO at Extreme Networks.
We see a world where people have become infinitely distributed around the globe, which means businesses must work at scale and focus increasingly on becoming consumer-centric to connect with every one of them.
Hi, Brendan.
Hi, Allie. Welcome to Inflection Points. We're at the end of this season, so how has it been for you?
It's been great. It's hard to believe this is our last episode today, and I'm really excited about the topic we're talking about because it seems to be pretty foundational to everything else we've been talking about. We're going to cover.
Yeah, it's both foundational, but it's really one of those ubiquitous technologies that just crept up upon us. So throughout this season, we've been talking about AI, AR, VR. But one that's just always been in the background that everyone is just use all the time is Wi-Fi. So what's your opinion on Wi-Fi and, how it became something that's like just normal?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a really good, you said that so well, because I feel like that has been a trend that's come out of our conversations this season is a lot of what we have been exploring with our guests have been these technologies, and some are newer than others, right? But in general, they are technologies that exist today that we sort of take for granted, but they're changing so much. And we really are having to think, not just 1 or 2 steps ahead, but 3, 4, 5 steps ahead to prepare for those coming changes. I'm really happy David's here with us today. So David Coleman is a director at Extreme Networks, Office of the CTO. He is an expert on Wi-Fi and cloud technologies. He's a frequent guest at speaking events and training sessions and has written multiple books about wireless networking, including some of my new employee books, the Wireless Intrusion Prevention System for Dummies, but also the 5th edition of Cybex Publishing's Certified Wireless Network Administrator Study Guide, which I need to get into myself.
Yeah, and I think very important as well. He's also CWNE number 3 or 4, I think, David.
1, 2, 4.
Which is really important if you want to gain trust in the wireless world.
So, David, you know a little bit about wireless networking technology.
You could say that. I've kind of, I've been very lucky, and I've built a kind of a whole career somehow around Wi-Fi, which I'm actually also very passionate about. And I actually got started in the very early days of Wi-Fi before it was even called Wi-Fi. And, I've been involved with the technology ever since.
That's great. Well, I think we've got a lot to learn from you today, and I'm really excited. We want to get into Wi-Fi 7. So really kind of what the future of Wi-Fi technology is going to look like. But first, I need to set the stage a little bit. Can you kind of talk to us a little bit about like current Wi-Fi standard, Wi-Fi 6, what that looks like, and maybe the history of different Wi-Fi wireless technologies?
And what are all of these 802.11, BE, X, AX? 6 and 7 is easy to understand, but where does this come from?
Yeah, and you make a good point, both of y'all, because it's a little confusing. The truth be told, a few years back, the Wi-Fi Alliance came up with this new naming convention. The Wi-Fi Alliance does the interoperability testing for the industry, as well as owns the brand of Wi-Fi, does a lot of the marketing around it. And so they went to a naming convention that was similar to like cellular technology. You have, 4G, 5G, to make it a little bit easier to understand. And prior to that, we had the naming for the technology was based on the IEEE standard, which is 802.11, which is the standard for wireless local area networking. And it has a history going back to 1997, actually. That's when the first versions of Wi-Fi came out using data rates of 1 and 2 megabits per second and some technologies that we don't use in Wi-Fi anymore, like frequency hopping. And it was mainly used for data collection in warehouses. Very quickly, a quick history. It got the name Wi-Fi right after the year 2000. That became kind of the marketing and brand name, which is trademarked. And I'll contend that it's a big as brand as, say, Band-Aid or Coca-Cola. Where the average consumer first got into Wi-Fi was when 802.11b came out, and we were on the 2.4 band and data rates of up to 11 megabits per second. The next big paradigm shift was probably around 2009, 2010, when we got 802.11n, and we went from CISO radios to MIMO radios. And that's really when the enterprise really started embracing Wi-Fi as well. And then there's been several more generations over the years. I'm not going to go through every one of them in the interest of time, but where we're at right now is 802.11ax technology, which has been rebranded as Wi-Fi 6. It has been around for about 3 years, almost 4, but about 3.5 years. And but more importantly, the biggest thing that happened in the last couple of years is that we've moved to a whole new frequency band for Wi-Fi. Instead of just 2.4 and 5 gigahertz, we now have Wi-Fi available in a lot of countries in 6 gigahertz. And we'll probably talk more about that because the 6 gigahertz band is the future for Wi-Fi.
Okay, let's explore that. What does that mean?
Okay, sure. So, I mean,
straight in, Allie.
Yeah, straight in. So, I mean, Wi-Fi. So over the years, for the first 10 years, you were probably using Wi-Fi on the 2.4 band, 2.4 gigahertz, but there was only 3 channels available. It's an overcrowded band, and you can only do so much with it. Then, people started using, especially in the enterprise, but in home now too, started using 5 gigahertz, which gave us a lot more frequency space. And different countries have different rules and regulations on what they allow for what is called unlicensed spectrum, where you can use Wi-Fi as well as other technologies. The big paradigm shift that happened several years ago is the FCC in the United States, realizing the value of unlicensed spectrum, authorized the use of 1,200 megahertz of frequency space for 6 gigahertz. And if you add that up, it's effectively double what we've had in the last 22, 24 years in just 2.4 and 5.
And is that then the opposite of what happens in the mobile world, where the FCC and other regulatory bodies realize they can actually price this? So give it a price, license it, and sell it on. And is this kind of like a freebie? Is this, I'm not going to say socialism of bandwidth.
No, so I mean, I get your point. So the downside for maybe a government agency that regulates spectrum is they can't. When you have unlicensed spectrum, is they're not selling it, right? And they make billions of dollars off the telcos by selling the spectrum, right? With license free, though, they're not making any money, but there's an upside. And the upside is, it's been proven time and time again, when you open up unlicensed spectrum, it's a boom for innovation and a boom for the global economy. And the numbers that have been estimated that will happen to the global economy based on opening up 6 gigahertz across the world are in the many million, hundreds of billions and trillions.
And what will the impact be for the enterprise on moving to Wi-Fi 6?
Well, Wi-Fi 6, once again, has already been around for about 3 years, but we've ported it over now to 6 gigahertz as well. So to me, we have better efficiency. That was the impact of Wi-Fi 6. It has new efficiency mechanisms, and not just on speeds and feeds, but the impact of bringing 6 gigahertz into the conversation opens up a whole lot more possibilities. And the fact that it's a pristine RF environment that's never been used for Wi-Fi means you don't have to deal with some of the backward compatibility issues that we've had in the past with Wi-Fi, where that's been a double-edged sword. Yes, you can use older clients, but then they also drag everybody else down in terms of performance. So you don't have that problem now with 6 gigahertz. The other thing is, because it's clean and unused, I think in the enterprise, that to get directly to your question, Allie, is that I think you'll see a lot of mission critical applications move onto the 6 gigahertz band. So I'll just give one quick example: healthcare. So if you get into hospitals and healthcare, some of your applications that might be used over Wi-Fi might be literally life and death, right? So instead of them operating in, God forbid, the 2.4 band, which is the best effort band, or 5 gigahertz, which is now getting overcrowded, why don't you put it in a band that is pristine, is not overcrowded? You're probably going to have a better experience and for delivery of those mission critical applications. So I think you're going to see a lot of that. A lot of different industries start segmenting applications and different kinds of traffic per band and moving the more critical ones to 6 gigahertz.
Yeah, so we're still talking about licensed spectrum, so anyone can start taking this. So we've got the same scenario where it's going to catch up again next year. Should they not just have a licensed spectrum where for healthcare and just make that available and limit public access to it, like having a motorway, like you've got this pristine motorway, and we need to get people on it, but we also need to have like blue or diamond lanes on it, so we're replicating the same mistake again.
So, I mean, you make a point. You could do that, but when you start getting into, talking about like private 5G, for example, I mean, there's pros to the cons to both technologies. And I think it is my belief, and I believe yours too, Brendan, that I believe that both these technologies over the years are going to complement each other. So, I think Wi-Fi wins more absolutely in indoor environments, but there will be use cases for 5G and indoor as well. So to your point, I think, if we were to do that and there was like a segmented space of private 5G or even 6G just for healthcare, it would be used, sure, and it wouldn't be interfered with, but that doesn't mean the Wi-Fi would go away, okay? The healthcare will still use Wi-Fi because it's dominant in our society. It's not going anywhere, anytime soon. The other thing I'll add about 6 gigahertz too is I've been telling a lot of people is I think it'll drive a lot of innovation too. So look, and we're just getting started too, because all future generations of Wi-Fi are going to be dependent on the 6 gigahertz band. And by the way, the other bands aren't going away anytime soon. 5 gigahertz is still going to be very active, and 2.4 gigahertz is not going anywhere either. But 6 gigahertz opens opportunity for maybe even bringing some technologies into the wireless space that haven't really been that big of wireless technologies that are that have very high latency needs as well as bandwidth needs. And the number one example you hear talked about a lot is AR and VR. And I think we're getting ready to see a renaissance in those technologies, both in our personal life as well in the enterprise over the next 10, 15 years. And I think the number one access method that will be used for those technologies is going to be Wi-Fi, and it'll probably be mostly on 6 gigahertz.
I mean, it sounds like you said, we're kind of just beginning this transition. The technology is there, but it's going to take us a while to, for all devices to catch up, enterprise to catch up, get those mission critical applications on 6 gigahertz. So, but we're already talking about the next generation as well. So what does that look like?
Yeah, I think, David, you really need to justify yourself. This sounds like queuing for Taylor Swift tickets. You've got this fear of missing out, and you're trying. We're just getting Wi-Fi 6E devices, and you're trying to tell us Wi-Fi 7.
Right, and so that's a very good point. So I'll answer both of your questions. Okay, so first of all, the next generation that's coming is Wi-Fi 7. Okay, so I'll start with Allie's questions first. Wi-Fi 7, it's technically not here yet because the Wi-Fi Alliance owns the name and the certification testing has not yet begun. It's coming soon. There is some consumer grade stuff that's already hitting the market, but we're not going to start seeing enterprise access points until 2024, and clients aren't here yet either, but they'll come pretty fast. we can get a little bit, maybe in a follow-up question, we can talk more about the enhancements and features of Wi-Fi 7, but it's coming. It's coming. Now, to Brendan's question about, oh, there's 6 and there's 6E and 7. So that's actually a question I get asked all the time. It's like, well, why don't I just wait for the next generation? Or why do you come up to me with a new generation? Like, it seems like every couple of years. And like, that's just the nature of the beast of all technology, right? So, at the end of the day, the analogy that I've used very successfully for a long time is when you buy a new car. And if you buy a new car, the next day you drive it off the lot, the next day there's a new model, next year's model's available, right? And it'll have a few new bells and whistles. Okay. So, I mean, you're always going to be in that kind of like, should I wait or should I buy now? You need to, in the enterprise, the customer needs to be thinking about when they make the move based on their needs and where they are in the refresh cycle. But I will say this, wherever they're at, they should be thinking about moving towards 6 gigahertz and future-proofing themselves for 6 gigahertz.
So I guess, what do we need to do to prepare now? I'm an enterprise and I'm designing these networks for the future. Are they going to be different? So there's 2 big questions I want to get. One of them is, we typically use Wi-Fi at home for consumer devices connecting into home networks that will have, let's say, 1 gigabit a second. And there's a limitation there. So what's the point in pushing this new technology that has the potential for up to 33 gigabits per second when all the home devices are limited to this 1 gig or whatever limitation that we'll have? So is there going to be a new paradigm now for connecting devices all together? Services, let's say, based in one single location that have to start having high bandwidth communication? And how do we design bigger networks for this?
First of all, when you start hearing 33 gigabits per second for Wi-Fi 7, that is totally theoretical. We're never going to get those speeds. Okay, so that's that will be on the outside of the box. On a consumer grade thing. It's marketing hype. Now, I will say this, there's already been some demos from Broadcom and Intel where using an aggregate technology of multi-link operation that showed under controlled condition 5 gigabits per second. Okay. So, but even that is going to be, best conditions. The other thing I'll also add too, you said that typically, we're restrained to at home at the 1 gigabits. That's changing. There's initiatives in both Europe and the United States to move to 100 gigabits per second in the home. There's actually government initiatives to do that. So the pipe to your home and to the enterprise, that's going to get bigger. So we're going to need to have a bigger pipe at the access layer as well.
Yeah, so I'm going to throw in another one because I do know you're in Atlanta, Georgia, and I'm here in Donegal in Ireland. And we do know the spectrum division it's global divide. So currently I can use Wi-Fi wherever it's available. I can go to any country in the world. I can go to Asia, I can go to Japan, I can go to Africa, and it's all the same. And I go to Europe and I can more or less use all of the spectrum power that's available, apart from what's going to be reserved for radar. But with Wi-Fi 7, you're using the whole 6 gig spectrum, and it's more of a contentious issue for this. Whereas in Europe, for instance, I don't think we're going to get that availability. We're not going to get the full highway.
So that's a good question. Granted that 6 gigahertz did get started in the United States, but all these regulatory bodies talk to each other, and it is growing worldwide. Now, that being said, it is an indoor play initially. 6 gigahertz is only been available indoors. That actually is changing here in the United States. Effective yesterday, the FCC actually came out with the new rules and regulations for us to start using Wi-Fi with a different class of device called standard power, which will allow us to use 6 gigahertz outdoors. That's going to take longer in Europe. And also right now, even indoors in Europe, there's not as much spectrum available. That being said, I think the answer to your question is this. There's a move within the industry to lobby all these spectrum bodies to what we call spectrum harmonization. Because think about it. Does the rest of the world really want the United States and Canada to be the only countries to have 1,200 megahertz? Well, slowly and surely, other countries are realizing, no, we want to be competitive as well. We want to offer the same kind of spectrum, and it's not good for everybody's economy as well as good for more importantly, for the user. So we don't want a digital divide globally. We want to have the same type of access, even though the rules are always going to be a little bit slightly different. So I think over time, you will see wider adoption of more 6 gigahertz space in all countries. There'll be a few exceptions, and you'll also see outdoor adoption follow in other countries. Like it's going to be available very soon here in the United States.
Can we get into some of the use cases, consumer or enterprise? Like, what's the impact going to be? We've gone there a little bit, but maybe we can start to think about, like, once we've got, Wi-Fi 7 widely adopted, what does that look like?
So once again, once we get, I think Wi-Fi 7 will probably the main use case that will push off is wider use of some of these AR and VR technologies. But the availability of 6 gigahertz in general will impact all enterprise verticals. Okay, simply because it's just going to open up this space for a better user experience for all users. So I mentioned a healthcare use case. We're already starting to see the potential of it, believe it or not, in manufacturing. The companies like Zebra are already making handsets with scanning capabilities, scan guns that have 6 gigahertz radios in them. All the higher end smartphones all have 6 gigahertz radios in them. Most laptops have 6 gigahertz radios in them now. So, with it, in my mind, you can think of just about any vertical and newer use cases could be things like, well, let me put it what you won't see. Let me put it that way. To me, you're going to see anything that you can do with Wi-Fi in 2.4 and 5 now, you'll be able to do it better in 6 gigahertz. That being said, probably the one that's going to be slow will be IoT, right? Because IoT devices, the manufacturers want really cheap radios to keep the costs down. So that's why most IoT devices that are Wi-Fi radios still only operate in 2.4. So unless it's going to be high-end, like medical equipment or things like that, don't expect 6 gigahertz IoT devices anytime soon.
Okay. What are, if you're enterprise thinking about getting ready for Wi-Fi 7, what are maybe some of the deployment or design considerations you're thinking about either today, or what are you going to ask yourself in the future when you're ready to make that move?
Well, I think the biggest thing is make sure you future-proof yourself with 6 gigahertz, whether it's either 6C or 7. There may not be a lot of clients yet, but that's growing. I always tell people, whatever version of the technology, if you can control some of the client population, upgrade the client population as well. I mean, enterprises have a nasty habit of holding on to old client technology for like 10 years, and it just drags everybody down. I mean, how are you going to take advantage of 6 gigahertz if you don't have 6 gigahertz clients?
Yeah. So I guess, what do we need to do to prepare now? I'm an enterprise and I'm designing these networks for the future. Are they going to be different? So there's two big questions I want to get. One of them is, we typically use Wi-Fi at home for consumer devices connecting into home networks that will have, let's say, 1 gigabit a second. And there's a limitation there. So what's the point in pushing this new technology that has the potential for up to 33 gigabits per second when all the home devices are limited to this 1 gig or whatever limitation that we'll have? So is there going to be a new paradigm now for connecting devices all together? Services, let's say, based in one single location that have to start having high bandwidth communication? And how do we design bigger networks for this?
Yeah, no, so you still have to think about it, right? And the design right now, as basic as the rules that you mentioned, the differences in the regulatory between, say, Europe and America, the design's a little bit different because there's less channels available in Europe, but hopefully that'll change. Bottom line is the good news is I think we're going to see a use of wider channels, believe it or not, indoors, 80 megahertz size channels, because there's so much frequency space, will be the default in a lot of cases, which will be a good thing. And there's so many more channels that it'll be easier to design to cut down on a problem known as co-channel interference. But I mean, look, you're still going to have to design for 5 gigahertz too, right? So, and even 2 to a certain extent. So, you will have to think. It's going to be a little bit more complicated because you're not just thinking about, basically 5 gigahertz and then 2.4 is the best effort. Now you have to think about 6 gigahertz. So, so there's so many more things that come into play. You're also going to have to think about roaming. Roaming is very different now because it uses something called out-of-band discovery. And so there's a lot of things that you're going to need to prep yourself, both on the wired and on the wireless side. And that's why I just go back to what I originally said is use the tools that are out there, the Hominas, the Ekahau's, and there's like a dozen others. And, design your network properly and then validate it with other third-party tools as well as the tools supplied to you by your enterprise vendor.
So, out-of-band discovery, are we going to have proper roaming now? Will we have handover? So you should be able to switch between one channel and another until DFS turns on. You won't be sort of like out for a minute?
Yeah, so so dynamic frequency selection is not a thing in 6 gigahertz. So just clarify that dynamic frequency selection, or DFS, in 5 gigahertz is a radar avoidance technology. So if an AP detects a radar pulse, the AP has to inform all the clients to go jump to a different channel. And then sometimes it can take time, and it's supposed to happen instantaneously, but sometimes it can be disruptive. That being said, for standard power in 6 gigahertz, especially for outdoor use, it's going to use something called automated frequency coordination that's proactive. So bottom line, the AP will check in at deployment and then once a day to see if there's any incumbents that might already be using the frequency space, and basically ask permission to use a 6 gigahertz channel and power level. And as long as they're not interfering with any existing incumbents, they'll be granted that capability. So it's a proactive as opposed to reactive like DFS is.
Brendan, don't hate me for this question, but David, I have to ask, are we already talking about Wi-Fi 8?
I was waiting for that question. Yes. So, Wi-Fi 7 is not even really here yet, and people are already talking about Wi-Fi 8. So my guess is there's no official Wi-Fi 8 yet by any means, but probably there is some talk about a technology, not to be confused with the multi-link operation of Wi-Fi 7. There's talk of a technology where it's multiple AP technology. So think of a client actually being able to communicate at the same time with an AP over there and an AP over there, or 3 APs. And there's like 5 different methods that are being discussed. So kind of this distributed Wi-Fi architecture communications at both the physical layer and the MAC layer. Now, I'll be honest, I don't know if I'm going to be still around in the industry when Wi-Fi 8 gets here because I'm getting up there in my age. But that being said, that actually intrigues me. And the reason that it intrigues me is when I first got into Wi-Fi, I was self-employed for about 10 years, but I went to work for a little company called AeroHive 15 years ago. And the reason they were a startup, and the reason I went to work for them is they had a disruptive technology. They moved the control plane to the edge of the network and in their operating system, and all the control plane mechanisms was a distributed architecture, and it was brilliant. Nobody else was doing it at the time, and now everybody does it. So what Wi-Fi 8 is proposing is kind of like a distributed architecture that also involves the clients in the RF and in both layer 1 and layer 2. So I find it very, very intriguing, but that's at least 5 years away in my opinion. So,
but the technology is being worked on, isn't it?
It's in discussion. Yes, yes. There are engineers that are a lot smarter than me in the IEEE and in other regular standards bodies that are discussing it right now.
So can you just verify that one sort of element as well? Because you've mentioned 6 gigahertz is available in Wi-Fi 6E. These devices are available
Yes.
now. So are these going to be future compatible?
No, they'll absolutely be so they will be able to work with Wi-Fi 7, including on the 6 gigahertz band. They just won't be able to use like multi-link operations. So they won't be able to use that new bell and whistle. Okay. But they'll still be able to communicate on Wi-Fi 6E client. If you bought it today, it would still be able to communicate on the 6 gigahertz band all day long, but it won't be able to do MLO and multi-link operation. That would require Wi-Fi 7 clients, and we don't have any Wi-Fi 7 clients yet. So at the end of the day, and by the way, Wi-Fi 7 will still work with your 2.4 and 5, your 802.11b clients. I should kill myself for even saying that, but they're still. An 802.11b client can still connect to the 2.4 radio of a Wi-Fi 7 AP. Please don't do that. But but the bottom line is, legacy clients will still be able to use their own mechanisms with the future technologies. They just will not.
2.4 might become the 2G of the future. Nowadays, 2G's clear, so they're for IoT devices.
It really has become a kind of an IoT band or a best effort band. You don't want to put any mission critical applications on it. And, we've even had discussions like, do we build an AP that doesn't have a 2.4 gigahertz radio in it? And we never seem to be able to do that, right? Because there's still so many clients out there that have 2.4 radios that are still using them. I would recommend you not use those clients, but they're still out there. And as I said earlier, there's a lot of IoT that only operates on that band, like your Ring doorbell or something like that.
So it's been really interesting to hear about how we're continuing to evolve Wi-Fi technology, how we're going to use 6 gigahertz, and even thinking ahead to Wi-Fi 8. What, can we make any generalizations about the future of Wi-Fi? Big picture, what does it look like? Where is it going? Thinking 2030 or far beyond that?
2030 or beyond. Sure. So Wi-Fi technology, I'm fond of saying it's ingrained in our daily communications culture. Okay. So it's going to be around. And even as other technologies like private 5G and by 2030, maybe 6G, Wi-Fi is not going anywhere. And as a matter of fact, its growth trajectory is like that, still a hockey stick, as well as some of those other technologies. I think they will remain complementary, and then we'll start to see, in big picture, we'll start to see some convergence between the various RF technologies. And it's not just the cellular versus Wi-Fi conversation. You're talking about all these other RF technologies like BLE and UWB and more IoT type technologies. Lots of APs have those type radios in them as well. So convergence first on the management plane, on how you manage all these various wireless technologies. Convergence later in the control plane, and maybe even access policies that could apply to across, say, a 5G network to a wireless network. And then eventually, and most importantly, and Brendan and I have talked a lot about this privately, is convergence on the user experience too. Because at the end of the day, the average user doesn't care how they're connecting. They just want a frictionless and happy and secure connectivity and experience. A couple other things. I think in general, networking is going to change a lot. There's a big push to move more and more processing to the edge, even though everything's been cloud-based and cloud managed. A lot of the processing for like these latency-intensive applications like VR and AR are going to happen at the edge. So the use of containers in access points in conjunction with what is being used to provide the connectivity, you're going to see more and more of that. You hear a lot of talk about digital twin technology moving forward in all aspects of wireless communication. And of course, the overhyped, but for a reason, truly useful technologies of AI. We're going to see revolution. ChatGPT was a pivotal moment for our society, and using AI and all these wireless technologies, including Wi-Fi, will be, and already is starting to become something that we will see grow from 2030 and beyond.
That's great. Thanks so much. This was super interesting. I learned a lot. It was great to talk to you. Thanks for the time. We appreciate it.
It was my pleasure to be here. And I believe this is the last episode of season 3. So I don't know if you saved the best for last or you just got the guy to fill in, but it was a pleasure. I always have fun talking to both of you.
Same. Definitely saved the best for last.
Okay. Well, thank you.
Thanks, David.
Well, Allie, I think we're safe in we're in good, safe hands now with the likes of David. I know he mentioned that he's not going to be involved in this for too much longer when we get to Wi-Fi 8 or 9, but we're definitely secure for Wi-Fi 7.
Yeah, that's good. And I think, maybe next season we can cover Wi-Fi 8, but there's a lot ahead.
Yeah, definitely. We've covered a lot of topics during this season, and it has been a whirlwind as well. And I'm glad it finished up with tying everything together, that everything needs to be in place for all of these new events and new technologies to come on board. So I'm really excited for what we've discussed this season, plus also what will happen next year.
Mm-hmm, definitely. And, we mentioned earlier, but I think one theme that we've seen throughout this season, whether talking to Justin about the edge or Carolina about artificial intelligence, I think a lot of these technologies have been around for a while, and, they're not new, but the way we think about them and the way we use them is changing. And they're all sort of supporting each other in this transition to, more infinitely distributed connectivity, more ubiquitous use of technology, and just how all of these technologies are going to work together to improve, the way we work and the way we live.
And it was really good having all of these contrary views as well. We could have been talking about digital twin and that sort of started dropping off, but now we've got this renewed view that it does have a future, AR and VR. I think we got a 10, 20-year plan for this. So I think we've got a lot more items to discuss. And I think probably in the next season, we can start getting into more impact on society rather than just in technology. So I'm really looking forward to see where it goes. And it's been a blast.
I know, it's been really fun. Something that has been eye-opening for me, probably not for you, but for me, what I've really been thinking about is how innovation and technology is really driving the use cases in some cases for, the industry, for healthcare. We are helping these industries think about how to use the technology, and not necessarily the other way around. It's not necessarily, the demand is coming from the users of the technology, but, we've got all of these great minds that are really thinking about what is possible and inspiring ideas and how to apply the technologies, which I think is very cool.
Yeah, exactly. It's not going to be just technology. It's going to be serendipity driving. So, I think we're setting the foundations, but it's going to be a really good, strong future. Let's shoot for the stars. Yeah,
definitely. Well, this has been a blast. I've loved getting into this with you this season, Brenda. It's been really fun. I got to ask a lot of great questions and, learn a lot of the basics myself.
Yeah. So don't worry. I thought I knew it all, and it turns out I didn't. So that's
okay,
anytime you're learning is good. So thanks a lot.
Thank you for tuning in to the final episode of Inflection Points Season 3. We trust you enjoyed the subjects we delved into and eagerly anticipate your return in the coming season. Join us again for engaging dialogues with industry experts as we forge ahead, uncovering the limitless possibilities of the infinite enterprise and its evolution into 2030. If you're new to Inflection Points, check out our previous seasons in our back catalog, hosted by Tim Harrison and Carla Guzzetti. There, you can hear about developments in drones, biometric signatures, the digitalization of healthcare, the future of cloud technology, and more. All available on demand now.
If you'd like to learn more about the Office of the CTO at Extreme Networks, check out our thought leadership content at extremenetworks.com/resources/blogs, and look out for our gold Office of the CTO logo. We hope you continue to enjoy Inflection Points. Stay tuned for the launch of Season 4 in early 24. Every month, new episodes will be released on Wednesdays. Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Remember, you can select between video and audio only streams based on your preferences.